to everyone. Hi, Sejal. Good afternoon.
Hi, hi.
And
Good
good
afternoon.
afternoon to my team and all the students and even non-symbians if there are few. So, very good afternoon from Symbiosis Biodiversity Cell. Sejal, I will take just few minutes to introduce Biodiversity Cell,
So,
usually to our resource person, as well as if there are any new attendees who don't know about Biodiversity Cell.
sure.
So, Sejal, Biodiversity Cell came into existence in 2018. When before that, for 2 years, we worked on biodiversity documentation on our campus. This was an exercise to publish a field guide, a book on the fauna of our campus. So we could document around 200 species in 1 year and 2 months of time, 2016 to 2017, including birds, reptiles, amphibians, and mammals in insects only butterflies. So once the book got published, the team, including me and two other professors and few other students, we thought that we should convince management that this project should not end at the book only, and we should keep continuing further documentation, because we got to know that there should be some effort or work happen on conservation level, on the protection, or if there is any intervention happening in the campus, we should have something in hand to tell management ye mat karo, wahan mat karo, or then give them some alternative, because we got to know there are few habitats which are really very sensitive for few faunal species. And thus, in 2018, management felt that yes, they should have a biodiversity cell, and the rest is the history. So from 2018 till today, we are working on three pillars, we say: documentation, continuous documentation of flora and fauna on the campus; education awareness in terms where I interact with students as well as staff of our campus. Then staff even include the ground staff, where security guards and housekeeping maids are trained to document fauna, especially on campus. Whatever they see, they just click a photo or they write down, and then they send it to me, or I go and check their book. But they are doing it very fantastically. And the third part is conservation and protection, and that is very nicely happening. Since last 2 years, we have been successful to stop construction or some intervention in terms of beautification and other things in few areas in the campus. So yes, in a way, biodiversity cell is working very hard in terms of even protection of whatever habitats we have got to know in our campus. This COVID-19 scenario has opened up this different kind of platform to us. Till last year, I was not that much lucky to get to connect with students in a larger number. Because being in Pune, I used to call few of the experts like you on campus once in a while, and physically jitna ho jata tha utna hi tha, but I never had thought that I can connect or could connect more students across the campuses, across the colleges of Symbiosis, and even those who also can come and attend, those even non-symbians. And since September last year, we started this Sunday special session, where every Sunday people like you who work in wildlife or conservation or
Today we have among us as our invited speaker, Ms. Sejal Mehta. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. I would also like to welcome Ms. Shilpa Avate, Officer Biodiversity Cell, and Institute Director, staff members, students, and our audience present here. Now I would like to introduce you all to Miss Sejal. Miss Sejal is currently consultant editor at Marine Life of Mumbai and writes science communication for Marine Spaces. She was also part of the core team that launched Lonely Planet magazine India as deputy editor, at National Geographic Traveler India as editor for digital, and in Servus Wildlife magazine as consulting editor. In the past, she has also worked as equity research editor at JP Morgan Chase and as a cub reporter at Femina, where she worked on the people pages of the magazine. Ms. Sejal would be speaking about the topic science communication and Mumbai shorelines today. And over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Devesh. I'm so sorry that this is Sunday evening and you'll have to sit indoors. But for all of you who did show up, thank you. I'll try and make it worth your while. Okay, so should I just start with my Shilpa? I love the initiative, by the way, and I hope there's lots more to come in the next few years for you guys. And if there's anything else I can do even after the session to help you guys out, please give me a shout out. I just loved it, and I'm so stunned at the commitment of these guys that they are here today to help out. So just 1 second. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Since we're a small group, just let's keep it as informal as possible. And what we can do is whenever, if the network is shaky or if you can't hear me or something, just let me know. Okay. You can keep your mics on and all of that if you want. Okay, start. Cool. Okay, so again, very well welcome now, and I'm going to invite you to Mumbai and take you to our beautiful beaches and shorelines. And before that, I'd like to ask you, and since it's a small group, this is easier. When I say Bombay, what comes to mind? Keep your mics on and let's chat. Since it's a small group, let's just talk. Any words that come to your mind when I say Mumbai?
Bollywood.
Sorry?
Yeah,
Bollywood.
Bollywood, superb. Man after my own heart, Devesh.
Financial capital.
Movies, what else?
Financial capital.
Financial capital, excellent. What else? What else? What did they say? I couldn't hear that.
Local train.
Local trains, high rises, traffic, right? This is what you think of when you think of Mumbai. It's busy place. It's home to almost 2 crore people. It's just, it's where everybody comes to sort of work. It's a city that never sleeps. So I want to talk about, and since I do science communication, we kind of talk about this not so much in just a wildlife and conservation way, but also in a way of thinking. Like when you think about creatures, and Shilpa, and you spoke about how you guys have been documenting something that's right in your backyard. That's very interesting to me, because what is the idea of home, right? What is the habitat? You are sharing that habitat. When you go and document that, you are also there. So what is the idea of home that we are talking about? In Bombay, there are many types of habitat, 3 that we usually concentrate on. One, and there's mudflats. Mudflats of Bombay, the muddy intertidal, everybody's heard of Shuri, the flamingos, the famous flamingos that come to Bombay. So this is the kind of ecosystem. This is also an intertidal zone with mangroves. Rocky shores. Okay, 1 second. How many of you are familiar with the Bombay in almost, even if it's not something you visited, you know of Bombay? Like, have you seen the city at all in terms of having interacted with it in any way? Then I'll tell you what this is. This is Bandstand. That's why I'm asking. Has anybody been?
Sejal, I haven't been in Mumbai the way I should.
This is how you should.
So I'm looking forward to walk with you on the beaches.
Yes, yes. So guys, this is Bandstand, and you must have heard, and if you do come to Bombay, there are chances your friends will take you to Bandra Bandstand. This is where everything happens, very happening sort of promenade that is in the city. But what it overlooks is this large intertidal space that hosts many creatures. So these are rocky shores. This is again something that even if you've not been, even if you've not visited, you know Haji Ali? Everybody knows Haji Ali, the Dargah, the mosque, yeah?
Yes, ma'am, we have heard of it.
Correct. This
Yes,
is the
ma'am.
intertidal that is around Haji Ali. And when the water retreats, this is what is revealed. Now, what does that mean? What work can I do on the shore? Usually then we go to the beach when it's high tide, right? We love the water. We love those giant waves that come crashing onto the shore. So what is it to do there? So my work and the work of Marine Life of Mumbai revolves around the intertidal zone. What is the intertidal zone? Now you see the photograph on the left. You see the waters retreated quite into the distance, yeah? On the right is when the waters come up. So the area that the water reveals when it retreats, the area that is revealed when the water ebbs is called the intertidal zone. So when the low tide ke time pe, when you go on the shore and what you can see, that constitutes the area that the team and I work on. So what can be there really in the intertidal zone, and why is this so amazing? Why is this so important? So where else, guys, tell me, will you see this weird combination of an area that is covered by water, and according to diurnal tides, and whatever that is, how many times of day the water comes in and goes out. So salty water comes in and goes out constantly. So it's constantly sort of under saline water and then not. What other area has this harsh sunlight through the day, moonlight in the night, salty water in and out? It's a very, very specific sort of intertidal ecosystem. Not anywhere. Deep seas may, if you go, then these conditions don't exist. If you go in a forest, saline water doesn't exist in the same way. It actually exists. This combination of factors only exists in this beautiful strip of land, which is why whatever lives here is also very, very unique to this system. It's because the conditions are like that, so the animals are like that, which is true for anything. Like in your backyard also, the things you kind of document live there because the situation allows it, and all the forces that allow it to live are specifically attuned to that. It's the same for the intertidal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to one spot. What do you think this is in the front, in the right front of the screen? Give me a guess. Anything that comes in your mind. What is it?
Fungus.
Not a bad guess. Anything else? Anything else? Anybody else? Come on, guys. I can't do this on my own. Tell me one more.
Spongy.
Sorry?
Sponges.
Sponges. Wow. Not sponges, but close. So, guys, this is an egg sac. It's an egg sac of a sea snail called Spiral melongena. It's a large sea snail that inhabits the intertidal zone. Now, if you see this photo, this is very Bombay. Okay. In the beginning, there is an animal that is literally laying babies and living its life on one rock. There is a crow in the distance that you can see that is looking for its dinner. Still in the background is a fisher boat that's out for its meal and its catch and all of that. And in the middle, this entire thing is the intertidal zone, and it's just one tiny patch of what Bombay is. Now imagine an entire coastline of the city, and now imagine an entire coastline of a country. This little patch has so many things under these rocks that you can't even imagine. There are things that we don't see. And plus, in the intertidal zone, and this is something a scientist told me, what you see also now is 1/4. If you break open a rock, there are things living inside those rocks as well. Now, if you step back and you look at the shore, it is a giant living thing. What we think are rocks, what we think are stones, what we think is just movement of water is literally a home for like crores and crores of living organisms. So this is just a tiny patch of what Mumbai's Juhu Beach looks like at low tide.
So Sejal,
Yes, Shiv.
Usually when we talk about marine life, we see that when scuba divers go down and there is this beautiful water, and then those are all beautiful creatures and corals and all. But we had never thought about marine life in what you are telling us.
It is exactly, and that is what the shock is. That you can literally walk up to, and some of the creatures that you see here, you think are, you see them only in deep waters. Yahan kaise aa gaye? But actually, that's the beauty of an ecosystem that's, it has no boundaries, right? Between the intertidal and the shallows and the deep, animals commute. And we don't know how far they go, and we don't know what makes them stay where they do. So, for example, familiar creatures. What is this? sorry, this one. It's a sea star, a starfish as we know it as, and it's like the star of all our, childhood nursery rhymes, your poems. And you think this kind of animal is actually found in deep oceans, but this is Juhu, by the way. A lot of my photos are from Juhu because it's literally very close shore to my place. And yeah, so we see sea stars. Now there's two things you should know about this animal, which is actually mind-blowing. One is that when it eats, and what it eats is at barnacles and clams and stuff like that. When it eats, it literally, and this is the first thing I heard about this animal when we were looking at it. Abhishek, who's actually here in the room, he told me that starfish, when it actually it climbs over its food, tries to wrench it open, and then it throws its guts outside of his body, partially digests its food outside, and then slurps it in like a slurpee. So that's how this animal eats. And that you would think that that's the most amazing thing about it, but it's not actually. Many times you come across sea stars and you'll see that, oh, one of their arms is shorter, or it's missing an arm, or it's missing two arms. A sea star, when one of its arms is broken off, it can actually regenerate an entire arm. So imagine your limbs cut off and you can grow another limb. And of course, anything about the intertidal is that itna to kafi hai nahi, kuch aur bhi chahiye. So a sea star can of course grow an arm, but if it only has an arm left, say all four of its arms are gone, it's only got an arm left and a little bit of the brain tissue in the oral disc that's in the center, which is actually on the underside of the animal, it can grow an entire sea star again. It can regenerate its entire body. This little thing that you see on a rock has these kind of abilities. So this is at Juhu. A cousin of this is a brittle star. This is a bit Bollywood type because it is nocturnal. You don't see it much in the day. It's a party animal, goes out at night. Unlike the sea star, which is very, very slow moving, even when it has like 100 feet under its body, it's very, very slow moving. The brittle actually, kind of glides across the intertidal like a daddy long legs. It uses its large arms to walk. Like, you'll all know what crabs are, of course. I wanted to show you one that's really, really common on our shores. This is called a porcelain crab. Anyone know why would it be called a porcelain? The answer is in its name, actually. It's as brittle and as delicate as porcelain. So what happens is if a predator tries to, it breaks as easily as porcelain. But the amazing thing about it is that if a predator tries to get it, it uses something called autotomy, which means it voluntarily loses a limb to escape. It will grow it back. But it will, just to escape, it will literally throw back a limb and leave. And sometimes you'll find evidence of that on an intertidal on your walk. You'll see that somewhere a porcelain crab has had a very bad day. And this is evidence of it. Everybody knows what this is. And so this is a short video. We found an octopus in Juhu. We generally find these creatures. They're actually not rare, but they're just elusive. They're so smart that they're very, very difficult to spot because they're just, before you can say octo, they've run. So, and then you can't see them because they're camouflaged out of their wits. Now, when I play this video, you will see the octopus camouflage in action in a little way where it becomes brown. So the chromatophores, it has cells on its skin which allow it to change color. So I'm just going to just watch it become brown. You saw that? It took the shade, it took the color of the intertidal. Okay, so I wanted to show you this because, well, every time we talk about it on our walks, people are just like amazed by its presence. This is a sea snail. Because of the shape of its shell, it's called a cone snail. Now, the most amazing thing is tinged with venom. So when it attacks something, its stabs it, wheels it, eats it. Now you would think, wow, that's crazy. But again, itna hi thodi kafi hai, aur bhi chahiye. So the cone snail, once it loses a harpoon and kind of gets a creature, by amazing ability that it has, it gets replaced. So when it loses one harpoon, the harpoons get, it's like, think of a conveyor belt on an airport. It's like that. You take one, other one's right there. So it's like a shifting conveyor belt. It's like an arrow that never goes out of a quiver of arrows that never goes out. So it, yeah, and that actually is still not the best thing that it can do. It has a little bit of a laboratory in its head. So what it can do is, it's actually one of the most toxic venoms that is out there, and there's no antidote for it. And scientists are now, like, you know, studying it to see what they can do in terms of medicine. But it's so amazing, and it's so difficult to find an antidote because it does not use the same venom for everything. So it's, for example, it says, I want to attack Shilpa, though it never will. It will attack a creature of the intertidal. It will not attack a human like this, but just for argument's sake. So I'll say I want to attack Shilpa. I will use venom and certain combinations in my brain that will get Shilpa and Shilpa only. So I will be able to make a venom that is suitable for something. So that's the kind of amazing powers it actually has. So that was your amazing cone snail. Then we go to, anybody take a guess on what this is? What does it look like? Okay, I'll give you a hint. It was in Finding Nemo.
Sea anemone.
Yes, excellent. Who did that? Who said that? I can't see anyone.
Aditya.
Aditya. Yes, Aditya, you're absolutely right. So this is a sea anemone. We found it in Haji Ali. It's actually some of its cousins, which played a very, very vital part in Finding Nemo, as Nemo's house in the beginning of the film. It was this beautiful swaying tentacle property that it had. So anemones are named after the terrestrial plant. It is so often confused for a plant on the intertidal, and you would not be, you know, it's not really something that you can help because it looks exactly like a flower. And when you see one on the rocks, the sandy ones, it's called pearl anemone. It's actually buried in the sand, and it seems to have like a stalk also, which is a column really that it attaches itself on a substrate. Now, the sea anemone is part of a group called cnidarians. What is amazing about cnidarians? All cnidarians have stinging cells. So these are your jellyfish, your coral, your sea anemones. These all, and they all have stinging cells in varying degrees. Not everything, like a jellyfish, if you meet one in the ocean, and if it's a deep sea jellyfish and if it's very venomous, it's probably going to hurt you a lot. But an anemone is not, the stinging cells are not as powerful. So you might just get a little irritation if you touch the tentacles. But that's the sea anemone. By the way, the sea anemone has this superb thing, is in a very enviable show of self-reliance. The sea anemone, when it wants to reproduce, it doesn't need anyone else. It just sort of splits into two and becomes two sea anemones entirely. That's how amazing it is. So all of these animals that you saw, and this is something that we faced on our social media channels as well, because we put all these beautiful zoomed in pictures of these creatures, and then people come to the shore and they see things that are literally the size of our fingernails. So a lot of intertidal life, of course, they can't be giants on the shore, are very, very minute. And you have to literally get down on your knees to see them. So I'm going to just show you a couple of things that when you think about storytelling, even in your backyard, when you document things, try and think about it in a way that you can zoom in and zoom out. So what do I mean by that? What do you think this is? Those are my feet for scale. So look at what it is, right? You can look down on it and think that there's a little bit of silt, mud hai thoda, featured jaisa lag raha hai, some kind of hole, pore things. It must be nothing spectacular, right? But this is when the tide is out and there's no water on it. When the tide rolls in, this is what it becomes. These are called zoanthids, zoantharians, actually. They are also cnidarians, like the sea anemone. And this is one of the species we find in Bombay. It's called the Palithoa mutuki. So when the tide rolls in, it sort of shows you its colors. And even the tentacles here, it has a toxin inside it. That so all cnidarians have some sort of really like venom, toxin, defense mechanisms. And this you'll find only on few shores of Bombay. Really, really beautiful. And a lot of our people actually come to see them when they've seen photos of this beautiful animal. And these are all animals, by the way, guys, no plants yet. So these are all living creatures that, and when they are closed, you can't even tell. Like you couldn't even, and this is the other species of the same animal. It's called Sansibarius. And yeah, this is what it looks like when the water actually comes. So this is what it looks like. Imagine, this is what it looks like when it's closed and when the tide is out. You can't even tell. And when the water comes in, because they take their food from the water, they take particles from the water.
So Sejal, this is actual the color we can see?
Yes, when you come, yes, even when you come and look at them, it's literally this beautiful green that kind of, it's like a peacock green.
Wow.
That just shines out at of the water. These are beautiful, beautiful creatures. A couple of these are found at this very, very popular park in Bombay called Priyadarshini Park. It's in Nepean Road. And there's a whole shoreline in the back. And that's where you can see a lot of these. This is a type of soft coral. And that's what Shilpa, you were saying, that you think that we can see things in the deep, that you need to scuba for certain things. But this is a soft coral called a sea fan. And when you look closer at creatures, it's nice to be able to walk up to them. Of course, very nice. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But then when you actually go very close, look what happens. You find out that every damn thing, including animals, are actually homes in themselves. There are small skeleton shrimps on these sea fans that eat and live on it. It plays home itself. So an animal has a home and itself also can give life. These are all small little skeleton shrimps.
Whoa.
So the idea of, that's the thing, right? When you try and talk about, when you tell stories, when you document, you can't just say this is this creature, this is where it lives. You need to understand what it can do, and you need to understand what it can host. So you have to go as close as possible to it. Similarly, what do you think that is on the right? That little fan. Any guesses? What does it look like? Any guesses at all?
Maybe some footprint or something.
Some footprints.
Looks like eggs of some animal.
Jellyfish.
Wow, no, I wish it was, but it's not a jellyfish. Shilpa, that's right. They're eggs
Really?
of, yes. So we are now, as I said earlier, we're going to go closer, right? When you see something, you think, ha, kuch hoga, pata nahi. Those are squid babies.
Oh.
Can you see them? There's so many of them in that little bunch. And there are so many, we saw like hundreds of bunches that whole week on the shore around, I think November it was. Abhishek, correct me if I'm wrong. And then when you see, let's look at it again, slightly more closer.
Oh.
These are all squid babies. That the big nose type thing that you see in front is actually a yolk. What the mama does is it lays the eggs and then it leaves. But of course, nature thinks of everything. So it's not that the babies are no food. They have an egg yolk, which will support them till the time they're ready to get out of the egg case. And they're all like really excited. Look at, and this is the squid, not the same squid that laid those eggs, but this is a photo taken by Abhishek, Jamalabad, and in Juhu, I think, is when he found it as well. So this is what the animal looks like when it's grown up. It's a cousin of the octopus. What you see on its body are chromatophores. It is also capable of changing color. This is all found in the Bombay intertidal dives, as close as to the shore as you can possibly be. Like they're all walking in there. So it's not even something that you need to sort of snorkel for. When I saw these, embarrassingly, and I was very, very new on the intertidal space, I saw a lot of these and I confused them with those temple mein thali mein flowers hote na. I thought, because you do see those also on Juhu Beach. You see a lot of these flowers that have been cast away by people. So they are actually, again, cases of the sea snail species Indothias. And when you look closer, as this section is about, you will see that each individual egg sac has tiny little babies in it. All of those little bouncing things are all babies. They're all little snail babies that are going to grow up. And when they're ready to grow up, they become pink, like the other, when you saw that photo. The pink ones are ready to hatch. What I'm trying to say is that when you look closer, especially at things like this, you see that, something that you looked at as a shore that, main to chalne ja raha hu, it's, a place that I do my exercise. It's a place where fishers go. It's not my space for any wildlife or in a safari sort of situation. This is what it has. If you look closer, this is what it has. Sometimes you think that something is not even there. Now I want you to keep looking at this little white tube-like thing in the middle, okay? Wait for it. Guys, what is this? Take a very wild guess, please. Take a wild guess. Any animal that comes to mind. What does it look like? What can it be? What can it be? Anything.
I'm feeling so
Sea
illiterate.
Who said, what did she say? Sea? Sea urchin? I can't hear. I'm so sorry.
Shriman, can you come again?
Can you repeat that?
Sea urchins.
Wow. No, it's not an urchin, but good guess. So this is a worm, guys.
Really?
It really blew my mind because I'm not too fond of worms before I started walking. And the only interaction I've had with it is with an earthworm. And this is kind of related to that. It's the feather duster worm. When the tide is out, like the zoanthids, when the tide is out, you think kuch bhi nahi hai, kya hai? It stays inside its tube. When the tide comes in, it wants to eat particles from the water. It is a filter feeder. So it has an appendage like this amazing headgear, crazy fancy dress sort of party headgear that it has, that it sort of just opens up when the water comes in, and this is how it feeds. So this is a feather duster. When the monsoon comes, and if you're familiar with Bombay at all, I'm sure you are because you watch the news, and the city goes scurrying indoors and everything is like flooded. And I love the monsoon, of course, but I know a lot of people don't. The city becomes almost like non-operational, like you can't do anything in this weather. But this is when we like to go to the beach because monsoon visitors are the most gorgeous. This is again a cnidarian. Cnidarians are sea anemones and all of those, corals, jellyfish. So this is mistaken for a jellyfish, but is not. It's a siphonophore, I think, a siphonophore, and its common name is blue button. This is what it's called. And also Porpita. Porpita is a scientific name. We always like to joke in the team that it's a name so nice you got to say it twice. And it's just beautiful. These when just before the monsoon arrives, you'll see loads of these at the beach. They are, and you would think this is an animal by itself. It's actually a colony of animals. So all the things that you see, the central disc, tentacles, all of it is actually a colony of things. They're not individual features. So I can't call this an individual animal. It's a colony of organisms that kind of move together because they can't survive on their own. So these also they have stinging cells, but not really as powerful as the next guy. This is called the Portuguese man o' war. And this is sort of my tiger of the intertidal. I came into MLOM because of this creature. I saw it and I fell in love. When you see it on the water, it looks like, that this transparent bubble that is actually full of gas. It looks like a warship that's sailing on the water. If you all have seen Game of Thrones, and if you remember that Winds of Winter, that's usually what I think of when I see this animal on the water. It's like very powerful sort of, and its tentacles are sort of spread out and they can sting. So a lot of people get stung in the monsoons by these creatures. They are, it's like B.F. Chhabgar, who's a marine biologist who's written many books, the late Mr. Chhabgar. He's sort of made this, he's compared this to like a red hot sting, like a red hot whip that kind of, leaves marks on your body. And the thing is, you just have to, you don't know what to do when it does that, when it kind of fires, because if you try to pull it out as a defense mechanism, it's entire behavior pattern is to fire when it feels like it's in danger. So the more you try to pull it, the more it's going to fire. And people have actually sometimes had to go to the hospital for this sort of thing. So, but again, there was an entire, and this is why science communication and outreach is so important. A few years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, that these things started coming, because now there's social media and there's so many newspapers and all of that, that there was this mega scare in the newspapers where they said, oh my God, jellyfish invade Mumbai shores, and there's this attack of these jellyfish. It can't even move without water. Basically, this beautiful thing can't move without water. You just have to go and see it from a distance. Don't step on its tentacles and it's completely fine. This is what it looks like. And one of our team members have actually measured one that came to our shore, which the longest tentacle was around 7 feet. So if you meet this thing in the water, it's going to be a bad day for you. Now we've gone very, very close to the creatures. So now just going to move out of it. Okay. I wanted to just show you that how easy it is to see creatures if you don't have to go to a forest. You don't have to travel. You don't need a ticket. And you guys know that more than anyone since the documentation you do. Everything is literally a walk on the beach is a wildlife safari. And I'll show you the proximity we all live in. That's Haji Ali in the distance. This is a sea slug called the Bombayana, named after the city when it was first documented in 1946. And after that, public record mein kabhi nahi aaya hai. Only in 2018, the team spotted it again. And it caused quite a sensation. Not to say that it must not have been seen in the meantime, but definitely not been documented in public record. So finds like this are very special when you don't have to actually take a ticket. The octo we saw earlier, changing color, that's Juhu Beach, city in the distance. Another octopus. The entire high-rise structures of Worli overlook this little tide pool. And this little tide pool has animals like the octopus living right there in the middle of the city. The cone snail that I told you about, that really, really scary fellow, is here. So there's the team trying to observe it from a distance. I just wanted to show you what a tide pool actually is. When I keep saying tide pools, are these little pools of water that get left behind when the tide goes out. And each tide pool is a little forest. That's a Cretina, another sea slug, feeding on hydroids. Doesn't this look like a forest? It looks exactly like a forest. And this is exactly what an intertidal zone is. You think of forest with trees, well, those are actually animals that it's feeding on, not trees. These are hydroids, the same family as cnidarians, jellyfish and coral and all of those. The zoantharians that we saw earlier, that's how close they are to a beautiful, beautiful place in PDP. I think this is Geetanagar, I can't be sure. But yeah, this is how close everything is. You see the sea sponge? Somebody said sea sponge earlier or something, and this is a sea sponge. So, the creator of SpongeBob SquarePants, that very, very popular cartoon. So some amazing animator or illustrator looked at a sea sponge on the intertidal zone and said, wow, I found the protagonist for my next show. That's what it's actually inspired by, the sea sponge. And it's one of the oldest, most ancient organisms that you can find. Like before pre-dinosaur eras. Creature is that old. When you spend time, as you will know, because you've been now doing this for a while in your own colleges and your own backyard, I've never seen a jellyfish this big, only that one time in Bombay. This is again at Juhu Beach. It's like a tiny UFO had landed And it was just the most significant, beautiful sighting. Anyway, I'm always accused of playing favorites, and I'm totally a Nidarian girl. And jellies have my heart. And this, it's when you, like I said, when you spend time, this is the only time I've seen it in 4 years. But when it came, it was this big. That's the shoe first came. Unfortunately, it's probably dead because that's when you see it, right? When it gets stranded on a shoreline. But yeah, so you don't have to go far for wildlife to come to you. My last bit is about outreach, and then I will end. So when we spoke about this, I told you all these stories. You know, you're going to go back and say, wow, I don't know about that. And it's actually such a small thing, right? Like somebody has told me, the scientists in my circle have told me these things. We've gone and documented it. And it's such a small thing. But I'm going to tell you, and you will tell somebody else. And that's how community builds. And when MLOM formed, it was made of, you know, we might think that it's so cool, like-minded people get together. But when MLOM had formed, the initial team was as different as could be. Like there were people from banks, there were people in the financial sector, there were people who were artists, illustrators, writers, enthusiasts, students, and marine biologists. This group came together. And because the internal team was so diverse, our external outreach was magnificent. Because we didn't talk in the same language that scientists spoke. When a scientist would say something that was difficult to understand, all the others in the team would be like, "Ye to samajh hi nahi aa raha hai, please irritate mat. Don't bore us with this shit." So we were like, okay, that means we need to make this easier. We need to make this easier. It has to be accessible. It has to be accessible. And that's what happens when a group of people who don't have much in common come together, because then it becomes something magnificent. And that is what happened with MLOM. I think we just sort of, this is an old slide. The outreach is much more now, but we started just with 185 people. And it's really grown. And if you've seen our page, and please go back and look at it, and follow us, come to the shore whenever COVID allows, and see things. Because what this little thing did, and that is something that I think is a little part of an impact that MLOM was part of, this kind of outreach we put up on a place called iNaturalist. And that's something you guys should also use. iNat is a global platform. And when you put up your observations on it, somewhere you're contributing to science. It's very easy. You don't have to do anything. You just upload a picture and you post it. And global experts around the world will identify it for you. And they will say, this is what it is. And it's very powerful, because when that happened for MLOM's outreach and documentation, a couple of activist groups that were fighting against the coastal road saw it. And they kind of used this information, and the High Court actually accepted that there was a lot of gap in the biodiversity mapping that had happened. So that's something very powerful that simple outreach and documentation can do. Basically, that is it. You build community, become stronger. And when you just tell other people about what is there, I think slowly people start going out on their own. And that is where you truly won. Because you don't have to take everybody, you don't have to tell them constantly what to do. But when they kind of come by themselves, and this is something Shilpa and I spoke about earlier, we don't actually say on our walks anything to do with the plastic that's there or the sewage that's there. Does that mean it's not there? No, it is there. Look at this. This is what dew looks like in the rains. This is what we've thrown into the water. And this is what comes back. And when you do outreach, when you talk to people constantly, they come to the shore with you. And they kind of ask these questions that are a place to live. So it's tough for you and it's tough for this creature as well. And that kind of forms a very powerful empathy between species. When they figure out they're also breathing this polluted air, you're also breathing, they're literally right here. And yet they thrive. And probably that's the message that goes out when everybody starts to, this is a few articles that everybody now writes about the intertidal, and it's become something that's become very mainstream. And I'm very happy to know that slowly, maybe, I don't know, you never know, like birding and herping, maybe at some point tide pooling can become a thing that's done for pleasure and not just for documentation. So yeah, thank you. That's all I have.
Wow, thanks. I was about to say the same thing when you said that once the monsoon comes and I'm out there because there are some beautiful creatures, they arrive. And I was just instantly thought about when birds start coming in the month of October, November, and I just run to the forest or in the campus or to the water body to have a glimpse of migratory birds. It's same like this, and definitely it must have happened like that already. I think people must have been coming to shows to watch
Yeah,
these
yeah.
creatures and all.
In fact, now the team is very attuned towards certain seasonal behaviors that even existing creatures have. There, people are very curious about बच्चे कब होते हैं. Like we saw the squid babies in November, and October, November is when we saw them. And then you must be wondering that some of them were actually, we also saw cuttlefish eggs. And we were wondering, kya hua hoga? You know, what must have happened? Because there are such large numbers they give birth in, because I'm sure there's so much predation that happens. I'm sure things eat it. But they give birth in such massive numbers for this reason. So we're always wondering what must have happened to it. And so it just builds this kind of cycle of, communication that teams also chat about, and they all have their internal kind of favorites. The team is very, very big on sea slugs because they're difficult to see. They're actually very easy to document, but it's a bit of a challenge. So I think they're very, very tiny, and there are many different kinds. So yeah, we all have a little bit of and that's what's so exciting. It's just like birding, right? You feel so good when you have so many dekha. It becomes like that kya dekha. So it's, the team has started doing that, and that's very, very and now a lot of the team, and that's something that iNaturalist has done, a lot of the team also moved away and started to go for jobs in different places, and they've started their own little outreach things wherever they've been. So they've also started like Marine Life of Chennai, Marine Life of Abhishek, when he moved to Goa, started tide pool trails in Goa, and kind of spreads. And this is exactly what, it's just a beginning. I feel like the best is yet to come. It's just started.
So thanks. Before going for question and answer, Sejal, can you just introduce Abhishek? Because
Oh God, he's gonna hate it.
because I haven't also introduced formally to him, but I have got his
Jamalabad,
number.
show yourself.
And because I got his
Please.
number. Hi, Abhishek. I think
God,
we
this is
spoke.
worst nightmare.
We spoke for we chatted on WhatsApp because someone had sent me a photo of a fish on the beach, and I think I had sent to Abhishek, and then forest department people came and all. I think that was our quick interaction that time. I was not expecting you, so I'm very thankful that you came today. Thanks. So so Abhishek, he is working in marine life since last how many years?
But Abhishek actually founded it. He, Siddharth and Pradeep sir founded the initiative. Then I came in to do the outreach, and then the team grew.
Okay, good to know that. So yes.
If there are any questions, and otherwise my email, I have stopped screen sharing. I'll put my email on this. If there's anything that you'd like to know. And Shilpa, if there's anything that I can do for you, you can let me know.
Yeah, I've been wanting to go for a beach walk with students with you, but since last, when we last spoke 1.5 years back, I was planning to do that.
I know COVID has really ruined a lot of things for us. But
I had just started field trips for biodiversity group. We did 2 last year, one in Big One for birds and one in Saswad grassland. And then so after I was thinking to come to Mumbai also with students.
It would be great and everybody is welcome. Like this, as soon as COVID loosens its grip on us, please come. Walk the shores, it's quite magnificent.
So students, shoot your questions. You can talk, just say something, whatever. It's all yours. No questions?
What things at Sunday? Let them go.
I'm audible.
Yes.
Ma'am, there are reclamation projects which are going around in Mumbai for building that arterial road. So how will it affect this entire marine ecology? I mean, you said that the area is limited, right?
Yes. So there are certain sections of the city that have been marked out for reclamation. Some are going to be left alone and probably sea links with. Abhishek, correct me anytime I'm wrong. Some parts of it have like sea links. Some parts have shores that are going to be reclaimed. And some parts like Haji Ali have already had that process started. Like a lot of the shore is already reclaimed. What will happen, Rigved, right? Rigved is, that's how I pronounce it.
Yes, ma'am.
What will happen, Rigved, is that that is difficult for us to say. And I'll tell you why, because the marine intertidal biodiversity is very scantily documented in public record. So ऐसा नहीं है कि काम नहीं हुआ है. Lots of people have worked on this ecosystem, but they are in journals and backed by like gates that we cannot access. So this time for documentation is very vital because it's kind of forming like a jump off point for what is to come. So now we know that is coming. A lot of it is already started. How these animals will adapt is something we'll see. We have seen that they are incredibly resilient, but to say that जहाँ पे landfill हुआ है वो तो मरेंगे ही. Like there's no two ways about it. What is being landfill will definitely die. How will it affect the other creatures that live around it, and how will the next generation adapt? I think scientifically we still have to see. So we'll have to, now it's become more vital than ever to see how things go from here.
Okay.
That's a great.
Thank you, ma'am.
Abhishek, if you want to add anything to that, you can.
No, I just wanted to basically reiterate what Sejal said, that the whole issue is that we don't know how they will be impacted. And that was the main thing that a lot of us in our individual capacities were trying to highlight about the Coastal Road project, is that there are frameworks prepared by the government which require you to document what will happen. So I am not saying, or we are not saying there are going to be so and so XYZ impacts, because we don't know. Like Sejal said, there has been no study, but that study is mandatory and that has been skipped. That is the issue.
Yeah.
So that is why whatever little public documentation we have, which is actually, it's not a little, it's quite a bit that has been documented in 4 years. It's not in a scientific format, but whatever it is very valuable, because that's all there is. So we hope to keep this sort of community documentation going, so we get that baseline stronger and stronger. So we don't have to always rely on official documentation when something like this arises. And of course, it's not just the ecology of the creatures; it's also all the people who depend on the shores over here. There's a lot of small-scale fisheries that happens on the shore. There are lots of there are whole livelihoods that depend on the shore itself. That is all also getting displaced. So it's like many different factors are coming into play. And apparently none of them have been documented well enough by the project proponents. That's the biggest issue.
Yeah. So Abhishek and Sejal, we haven't even touched that sector, that small scale fisheries and how they are going to get affected. That is completely whole different big, I think, subject to discuss and talk about.
Yeah. And there are people actually who work on specifically that. So I'll be able to share some names with you if that's something that you guys want to discuss at some point. Very good work is being done in that region as well. Rigved, one more thing that I wanted to add is that going forward in terms of your interest in what is happening to creatures everywhere, I think it's also very important to know in this time especially that information comes to us in so many different ways and information comes to us from so many different sources. I think to also kind of figure out so we are very careful in a way to say, like how we said right now, that while indication says that yes, things could turn quite bad, it's always important to have scientific backing to that. कि क्या होगा किसी creatures के साथ, because both sides, the thing is here that, and in an ideal world, documentation should help everything. Like something like INAT should help a student also, should help a researcher also, should help the authorities also. It's actually there for a specific purpose. It's not supposed to be a rebellious thing or a
Very rightly
something that's
said.
going to help.
Very
It's
rightly
actually
said.
information. So data gathering is vital. So आप भी जब भी data को when you access, just ensure that it's not done in an emotional spurt. Like what happens is, and this is not, I mean, not for you, I'm saying in general since we're talking about it. Like a lot of even the conservation side of writing and conservation side of activism is also quite sometimes emotionally